Good morning. If y'all didn't know Goldie's a hugger. Did y'all see that? She's anybody that knows her, she's fantastic like that. So our topic today is around a culture of innovation, and we really started initially. The topic was innovation, and when we really looked at it, we're like, well, you know something, innovation isn't really that difficult to do. It's really more challenging to say, hey, how do I transform my culture, and what are some of the challenges associated with that? So we'll start with you, Ann. You want to just share a little bit about some of your challenges at EPA and some of the goals that you've set out for yourselves as it relates to transforming your culture?
Yeah, so I'm going to, is it on now? Hold on. It is on. Let's try it. How about that? Okay. We can make that easier, right? So let me start a little bit with our goals. From a cultural change and creating a culture of innovation, we really wanted to do some things that were very sort of antithetical to what we perceive the government to do in terms of culture. So we wanted to instill a culture where people are willing to take risks. Now, not people who want to take stupid risks, right? We're not asking people to go do things that are crazy, but to really take thoughtful risks in terms of progressing a project forward, and to make a decision to do something interesting, to talk to people, to make sure they have support, and then go forward and do that. And we make sure that the management team is behind that change and that risk. We also wanted to create more creativity and generally a culture where we're thinking about doing things very differently than we've done it in the past. And so the challenge there is it first of all started with disbelief, right? No one actually believes that we could do this. And so we had to start with our own staff and with the people we work with and with our customers, internal and external, to actually have people believe that we can do that. The other big barrier, I think, is the systems we work in, right? There are a lot of systems in the government that are built around laws, and when you get down to it, you discover very quickly that the law says one thing, and we've built a whole bunch of practices and procedures around that law that are stifling us. So we've tried really hard to question those to get down to understanding what's truly the law, and we respect the law, but we're sort of disrespecting all those practices we've built up over the years and trying to change those to make things different.
Thank you. John, same question to you. Wow, that's hot. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. You know, I think the first thing that we had to do was really break down the barriers inside the organization to work better together and remove a word and a phrase from the vocabulary of my staff. And that first word was no, and the second word was I can't, or that phrase. And really allow them to look at the way industry does things and the way the government has done things over years and move away from the government attitude toward a more industry-centric set of values, right? It's not about no and I can't produce, or no, I can't figure out a way, but this is what I can do for you. This is what I can provide. And focus on the deliveries to the customer with that new attitude, breaking down those internal barriers to really help set the stage for a culture that, you know, we're trying to embrace, and that's an industry culture of what's called DevOps, the union between rapid development and integration and rapid delivery. And so by taking those standards and showing people that, yes, it does work for industry, it has worked for a number of years, both Agile, user-centered design, and DevOps, and removing those internal mental barriers from their vocabulary and rewarding those that come up with great ideas, you really start to shift the thinking of the culture to provide the best that it can for the customer at the time. Maybe not everything they can imagine, but what really matters to them.
Yes, thank you, John. So, you know, as part of that, you know, the whole idea of how do we innovate and how do we drive change really sits at odds in many respects to things like security. How do we make sure we do something that doesn't create risk? And then how do we operationalize that? And we had some pretty interesting dialogue as we were even preparing for this around, you know, where do those challenges come from? Are they really inside of the agency, or is it outside the agency? So, Ann, if you want to maybe comment on that.
Okay. So we do know that people can deploy secure applications fast, right? We see people do that all the time in the private sector, and we see people do that occasionally in the public sector too. So we know it's possible. And one of the things that we've talked about in EPA is how important it is when you do DevOps, not only to include operations, but security, right? So security is in on the ground floor in your planning process, in your design process. And the same way that doing DevOps increases the speed of deployment because your operations team is constantly on board, we can do the same thing with security. So it's not, let me go build this monolithic app, and then let me deliver it to security. And then the security team can spend 6 months doing their security planning and their process, and they're going to get an ATO. No, we're going to do this all together. The other piece is to use services and platforms where we can inherit a lot of the controls. So everything shouldn't have to have its own ATO. Let's look at how we can build systems fast on common platforms. For example, we're doing some work using Cloud Foundry in cloud.gov, that GSA, right? So there's a whole bunch of things in that platform that are already set. A whole bunch of security controls are already there. For a particular application, you might need an ATO, or you might just need a security plan. So the extent to which you can make things go really fast by inheriting those controls and by working together throughout the entire process is huge, because we're not going to change the system that says we need an ATO. We're not going to make the realities of security go away, but we can find ways to have our teams work more effectively in that process, right? I think another challenge, frankly, for this is money, right? It's really hard to engage part of your operations security team in going really fast and working with the new teams and doing different things when there's not enough money to support the process. So we have to find enough money to keep the operations going so we can pull these other folks, part of the team, over to work in this fast-paced partnering organization. And we also need to value those equally. The folks working on the new stuff aren't more important than the folks working on the old stuff. We have to have the operations we already have work smoothly, and then we also have to do a great job of implementing these new strategies.
Thank you, Ann. John, same question to you. And you've got a unique situation as your agency is not supported by taxpayer money, so you have external, financially are supported from fees and things like that. I don't know if that has an impact at all, but...
Well, that is true. The United States Patent and Trademark Office is a fee-funded agency, zero tax dollars. However, in this instance, it doesn't make a difference, right? Federal compliance with security is a mandate, and they don't care how you get it done, just as long as it's a focus. And to be honest, the security operation, though we also include them on the ground floor with every new and existing effort, is one of the organizations in my shop that still uses the word no and I can't a lot. So we have to continuously remind them. One of the things that we've done is break things up into layers, right? And so embracing the cloud technology, whether it's the Amazon cloud, Google cloud, Microsoft, or whatever, and we use all of those technologies, plus our own internal Red Hat CloudForms cloud, which we have in 2 data centers in different parts of the country. What we've done is we've taught security. Let's break things up into layers. Let's secure the core infrastructure. Then we'll secure the operating system. And so versions of the operating system with various configurations of whatever platform we choose. And then we make sure that all the new development that we do is on those pre-approved platforms already. We've also segregated out a separate security review with any firewalls or core other pieces of infrastructure other than the virtual servers. So they take smaller chunks of security reviews over time, though we still haven't dissuaded them for doing a quick security check at the very end before we hit the button to deploy. It is one of the last hurdles that we have. But they are culturally taking smaller chunks and then forming the documentation up later. And they're also working very hard with industry, both Amazon and Google and so on, to embrace their technologies and evaluate what the security risks are there, and then coming up with ideas to solve those security problems, both that we give back or ways to mitigate them internally. So it is slow to change. It is one of the slowest parts of the organization to change, but I see a steady progress there on how to get it done.
That's great, John. You know, it's interesting. Speaking for private side of the business and as a supplier to the government, it's something we talk about regularly on our side. You know, what things can we do to accelerate the ATO process? How can we get involved earlier in the process? Historically, we've put a lot of emphasis on that on the DoD side, but on the civilian side, it's really become a major focus for us as well. And I'm certain we're not alone at Avaya. So next question was really around something that's near and dear to our heart is around the whole area of procurement and contracts. So how does it help or hurt, or what needs to change as it relates to those areas?
So I think procurement is an area that has been one of the biggest challenges when we've looked at how to deploy IT projects. And I think everybody knows that the way that the government generally does projects is we say, great, we're going to do this project, we're going to plan it out, we're going to do a full and open for this program. And before we do that, we're going to come up with all of our 800 requirements. We're going to know exactly what we want. We're going to do that full and open. We're going to expect the vendor to bid a firm fixed price based on these requirements without any idea of what might change. And then when we get all done, 18 months later, we're going to have a contract and we can start development, right? And that doesn't generally work very well, right? It's expensive because you got a vendor bidding on the full cone of uncertainty, you know, that space between the lowest possible cost and the highest possible cost, and vendors are not going to give you the middle price, you know, that would be crazy, right? They're going to give you the highest price or pretty close to it to make sure that they can actually make money on the project. It's just a fair thing to do, right? You're taking a bunch of risk, you got to make money, so the price is going to be up here, and you're not going to end up buying what you want in the end anyway. So what we're doing is really shifting away from that monolithic acquisition. And we're certainly following the lead of what you're seeing in 18F, of these agile acquisition vehicles. 18F's just gone through the process of awarding their first agile acquisition vehicle, where they have a bunch of vendors in a marketplace, and we can very quickly do an RFP and get a vendor on a project in, say, a month. From the time that you give them a piece of paper that says this is what we want, to awarding the contract and starting work. So EPA is going down the same road. We've got an agile acquisition vehicle that we're first going to come out with for developing scientific applications. So it's going to have some science components in there because that's a very important thing for us, and we want people who can do scientific modeling and simulation in that space. And so what's going to happen now, and there'll be a number of other types of vehicles after that, but what's going to happen is that if you want to start a project, we're going to help you work through that and say, oh, you want to do this project, this is a vehicle, and we can very quickly start someone down that road. And you know, we have a great example with our eManifest project where we started them with 18F and we're moving them to some existing vehicles along with 18F. And you know, we're still well within the window of what would have been their acquisition, and they have code deployed. You can go look at, anyone here can go look at it online. And you can see the code. It's available to look at, to see the products, the project status, what proof of concepts have been done. You can actually contribute to that code set if you'd like to contribute to the project, right? But the point is that even within the time frame where we were just still thinking about what we wanted to buy, thinking about doing an acquisition, we actually went and started the project, and we'll probably be done before the initial acquisition schedule is complete. So that is a huge change that I think will enable us to very rapidly deliver projects by moving away from that mindset that you have to have a monolithic acquisition for every project.
I'm all for that. That sounds like nirvana, so that's great. John, how about you?
Very similar. Try to avoid those monolithic procurements when at all possible. In fact, the USPTO for software development projects has gone away from hiring integrators at all. We are our own integrator. We've hired federal employees to do software engineering and development ourselves. We place those people on our Agile teams, and we use the contractors to help augment our staff and to develop the core products. Of course, we have to follow all the rules and regulations of the FAR so we can avoid personal services issues. But the bulk of it is contractors from multiple companies now take their expertise and they sell it to us by the hour, so it's time and materials contracts. and we manage the performance of the team and the integration processes. Now, that means we have a core infrastructure that can support it. We use Rally for our infrastructure projects and our software development projects to manage our user stories. We use Bugzilla to track bugs down to the developer. No longer is it hidden because some company uses one person to check in code. And we use regular code reviews and feedback from our own federal employees to tell us which contractor employees are performing well and which ones are not. And we compare that, the number of user stories produced, the number of bugs they produce, and all of that data gets fed back into a report card on the health of the contractor, individual contractor that's on the contract. And then, of course, we work with the companies to manage out those that are off of our service, those that don't perform, those that do. Ever since we started doing this, we saw a huge uptick in quality. And our deliverables now meet 100% acceptance at the end of every sprint, almost to a T. So it is a different take. Of course, being a fee-funded agency really doesn't help here very much, but having a good solid procurement and a contract and building task orders, our task orders relatively get filled within 30 days. So I'm pretty reasonably pleased with that. But we've taken a completely different take and really taken control of the horse by the reins, as it were.
That's great. Thanks, John. I think we've got time for one more question, and it's in this area of virtualization and in cloud, which I know, like from an Avaya perspective, this has been a huge focus from us. We used to sell refrigerators with phones hanging off of it, and now it's all virtualized now, and it's really been a journey. It didn't happen overnight, but it did take time. But it's a huge part as we have transformed and we have changed to the marketplace. And I know both of you have come from the private sector and had full careers in other areas. So I'd love to hear your perspective, Ian, on the on how virtualization and cloud specifically help to support your efforts around innovation.
So I think, first of all, I'm going to be brief because I think John is well ahead of us on moving towards the cloud. I want to give him plenty of time to talk. So virtualization has been a huge value for EPA, and pretty much all of our systems are virtualized, and you go into what used to be a big data center, and there's a rack sitting in there and a bunch of empty space. And so anyone who wants to rent some space, especially in Raleigh, let me know. We got empty space. The cloud, just very quickly, as I mentioned, we have not just one, but two projects right now in the cloud.gov system at the GSA has using Cloud Foundry platform, and we're very excited about those pilots. We're also piloting one of our internal shared services called CDX, which we use between us and the states and tribes and the regulated community for some things to transfer data. We're using a hybrid cloud for that with our own internal, our National Computing Center, plus the Azure cloud. And we're setting up our NCC, National Computing Center, as a cloud services brokerage to handle all of our cloud services for the agency and to help us decide where to place things and to manage that process going forward. So we're really moving into the cloud aggressively, but we're not nearly as far along as John, so I'm going to hand off.
Well, thank you. So at the USPTO, as I mentioned earlier, we've already embraced the FedRAMP-approved Amazon, Google Clouds, plus our own internal Red Hat CloudForms cloud, which lives in 2 data centers. One of the most innovative things that we've been doing with the cloud, which has existed in industry for quite some time, just is part of that breaking down of barriers and getting acceptance of something new, is this concept as part of DevOps of A/B rollouts or blue-green rollouts, where you have a completely virtual system and you have one of them that's in production now, we'll call that the green one, and you have the one that's about to be in production, blue, and you set it up, and with a flip of a switch, all of your users get migrated from green to blue. And then you watch and see how it works, or if you only want 10% of them migrated or whatever, and you watch how they perform, and if everything's good, then you switch the production to blue, and that now becomes your green system. And or you switch it off, and you're like, well, that didn't work. We'll have to go figure it out. So the power in virtualization isn't just scale. It isn't just putting your data in a multitude of places. It's not being able to expand your capacity, I mean, that's all basic. It's the power to leverage multiple instances at a very low cost threshold to really change the way production works for rapid development to rapid delivery as part of DevOps. So in a flip of a switch, I can migrate all users to a new virtual environment without their knowledge. They're operating in that environment. You can test it out in real time, and if it works, you can migrate to it. If not, then you can migrate back. And all of that happens seamlessly. Now, it takes a lot of practice, and you got to convince a lot of people that it actually works. Industry's been doing this for at least 6, 7 years. But not too many organizations in the federal government use it as regularly as we do. And we hope to do not only all of our development with it, but when we shut down the legacy systems, this will be the way we operate at the USPTO entirely.
Thank you, John. And I appreciate it. Even the planning on this was very, very interesting for us. And as we discussed earlier around how we were going to go from cycles that were development cycles and introductions that were once or twice a year to quarterly, and being able to have the capacity to even be able to push things on demand as needed. So exciting times, and no shortage of challenges. But I just want to thank John and Ann for your time today, and thank you.